How's it going, you guys, and welcome back to the channel. You know, this pandemic has been quite a pain in the ass when it comes to movie going, and we've seen so many films get delayed and delayed and delayed, with a few exceptions, with some films coming to video on demand. One film in particular that seemed to be hit the worst by this pandemic is Christopher Nolan's Tenet. So today, I figured that I'd talk about one of Nolan's trippiest films out there, and it still remains to be very popular to this day. Today, we're talking about Inception. Inception, directed by Christopher Nolan, stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. The story follows Dom Cobb, a professional thief who's able to enter people's subconscious and steal secret information. This skill is one to be praised by many, but because of his talent, he's lost everything that he's ever loved. In order for a chance at redemption, he's given the task of attempting to reach Inception and plant an idea within the mind of a CEO. Christopher Nolan is one of those directors that is truly gifted in the way he directs and writes his films, but at the same time, it also manages to leave you overthinking every single detail in it. One of my favorite trilogies of all time is the Dark Knight series, and yes, Batman is a really cool hero, and all the action sequences in those films are something to be admired, but at the same time, with the genius of Nolan and his writing, I think he was able to incorporate some really meaningful messages in those films. After viewing Inception, I gotta say that I wasn't prepared to be thinking as much as I did, and it ended up leaving me with quite the headache. However, as the film progressed, everything started to become a little bit more clear to me, and I got a better grasp of what was going on. But just to make sure I fully understood what was happening, I had to do my research just to be 100% sure. It's worth mentioning that Christopher Nolan had this idea in mind about a decade before Inception was ever released in theaters, and his original pitch was going to be the group going on a mission to steal dreams instead of planting ideas in them. Another thing that I found interesting about this whole story is that Inception was originally going to be in the horror genre. However, Nolan realized that his idea wouldn't work since the idea focused heavily on the idea of an interior state, so he needed more emotional stakes involved. Knowing all of this information, I'm actually more curious now to know how a horror-like movie of Inception would play out. But, seeing that the ideas already played a lot with my mind and frightened it to begin with, I think I'm better off passing. But what do you guys think of that idea? I'd like to know in the comments below. How do you think a horror-like version of Inception would play out? So before I get into the trippy aspects of Inception and fry your brains, I figured that I'd talk about some simple things first, starting off with the amazing effects. Sure, there's the moments of CGI, especially with the famous scene of the buildings turning upside down, but I also admire how Nolan is one of those directors that likes to mostly go with practical effects and only use CGI when it's absolutely necessary. For example, something like the mountain fortress right here is all miniature, and the amount of detail on it is really something to appreciate. And it's pretty safe to say that all these effects are going to make this movie hold up for many more years. I'm also glad to know that it's one of the older films and it's not like more recent films where it has the worst CGI ever. I also can't talk about this movie without talking about the cast. Leonardo DiCaprio, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Tom Hardy, Ken Watanabe, I mean, you name it. And on top of all the big names throughout this movie, every character also has their unique set of abilities, and it makes them stand out really well. Who's DiCaprio? The leader of the group, the con artist. Who's Ellen Page? The architect. Hardy is the master of forgery, and more that I'll mention later. I swear, they could make this movie into a video game, and I'm pretty sure it would be very successful. You'd be able to play each character with their own unique set of abilities, and you'd be able to go on certain types of missions, and it would make for some amazing gameplay, in my opinion at least. Something else that I admire about Inception is how it had a great display of teamwork. Everybody in the cast had some great chemistry with each other, and they knew how to work off of each other well, especially when the movie called for a little comedic moment or two. Their unique set of abilities were able to make for some cleverly executed plans throughout, and I was able to find myself enjoying how they worked together throughout each dream sequence. However, a problem that I see in this movie with each character having their own unique set of abilities is how one note each of them feel, especially with Tom Hardy, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and Ken Watanabe. Tom Hardy tried cracking some jokes and one-liners once in a while, which got a little cringy at times. Joseph Gordon-Levitt often felt stuck with this super serious personality, and something about Watanabe felt very mustache-twirly to me, probably because he was stuck in the role of a businessman. It's a little bit of a nitpick for me, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to be blanking out your minds in a little bit. And obviously, probably the best part about this movie is the action sequences. Obviously, you have some classic fight sequences and shootouts throughout this movie, but I think what Inception does best is integrating events from the outside world and putting it into the dream world sequences. You see this happen in the movie when the person sleeping is dunked in water, or when turning upside down turns the dream world upside down. It really made for some amazing looking shots and effects, and I think that just made it a lot more exciting to watch. Honestly, I think Inception really deserves a unique spot in a tier list when it comes to action sequences in movies. Alright, so here's the moment in the video where we talk about the concepts in Inception. Who would have thought that Nolan could take something as simple as dreaming and turn it into something more complex and fascinating for his story? Like I said at first, I wasn't able to get a grasp on what was going on, and the trippy ass effects didn't help me either as I was watching. However, with this film, as you progress through the story, I think it becomes a lot easier to understand. Nolan wanted to explore the idea of people sharing a dream space, giving one the ability to access someone's unconscious mind. The idea did make for an interesting concept, but like I said, I was pretty lost from the beginning of the film. So based on my viewing and knowledge of the film, as well as the additional research I did, I figured that I'd go ahead and give an explanation on some of the things that were integrated throughout this movie. I'm going to do my best to give the best explanation possible for the people that may not understand it still, but also for myself, just so I can have it documented somewhere. And keep in mind, if you haven't seen Inception yet, I'm going to be going into major spoiler territory here, so I suggest you skip to this time frame. So without any further ado, sit back, relax, and get ready to have your brains fried. So for this session, I figured that I'd bring in a special guest. Let me go get him. How's it going, you guys? My name is Mr. Girth, and today we're going to be talking about a certain film called Inception. In this class session today, I'm planning to talk about a few key concepts in Inception to help you understand the movie a lot better, such things as time dilation, kicks, limbo, and so much more on display. So without any further ado, let's get started. Now, the first thing to understand about Inception is that there are three key people. The first person is the dreamer, the person whose dream it is. Then there's the subject, the person the information is being planted or extracted from, and the architect who designs the dream levels. There are two types of dreams on display throughout this movie. The first dream is a basic dream where Cobb goes into subjects' minds to plant or extract information, kind of like the one we see in the very beginning of the movie. And then there's the multi-level dream world where a more powerful sedative is required, and this is where the group is trying to perform Inception. Next thing to understand is that each character has their own little totem, and this is to help them differentiate the difference between reality and the dream world. You might recognize the iconic spinning top, which is Leonardo DiCaprio's totem. If the top stops spinning at some point, then that means that Leonardo DiCaprio is in reality, and vice versa. I've already talked about some of the characters and their roles throughout this movie, but there's a few that I left out. So to go over that, DiCaprio is the one who plants the information. Gordon-Levitt is his assistant. Ellen Page designs the dream world they're entering, the architect. Tom Hardy is the forgery master, the impersonator, which allows him to transform into different shapes and people. Dileep Rao is responsible for creating the sedative that puts the group to sleep. Cillian Murphy is the subject the team is trying to perform Inception on, and Ken Watanabe is the one that hired the group to perform Inception. Next up is the concept of time dilation, and this is something that only applies in the multi-level dream world. In the multi-level dream world, you have 5 different levels, and on each different level, the time is stretched out into a much longer period of time. So what may feel like 10 hours in reality will be 1 week in the level 1, or 6 months in level 2, and so forth. Next up is the kick, which is probably the most complicated part of this whole movie, but once you get the hang of it, it's much easier to understand. For example, if you were in the basic dream world and I were to kick you in the nuts, you'll instantly wake up. In the case of the movie, a timer in the real world will help them to escape the multi-level dream world if they're awake on level 1. In the movie, we see some of the group get shot in the head or get dunked in water when in the basic dream world. And kicks are easier to use in the basic dream, but then during the multi-level dream is where they become a lot more complicated. For example, let's say we're both on level 1 and I was to come over and kick your sleeping body on level 1. Let's just say that won't be enough to wake you up if you were on level 2, and this is where the concept of synchronized kicks comes in. But how does that work exactly? Well, let's put it like this. Let's say you were on level 2, and I was to come and kick you in the nuts on level 1, while simultaneously on level 2, you fall from the tallest building. That would allow you to wake up on level 1. In the movie, Arthur listens to music on level 1 when he reaches level 2, since it's his dream, and he's the only one that's still awake on level 2, which helps him to know when to have the lift fall for waking up on level 1. Similarly, level 3 is Eames's dream, so he gets the music played to him on level 2 to know when to initiate the synchronized kick. Like I said, this part is a little more complicated when I discuss it, but when watching the film and seeing it play out for yourself, I think it'll make more sense in the end. Now let's talk about death in the dream world, which is a fairly simple concept. In a basic dream world, death is the same thing as a kick. Like we see in the movie, simple shots to the head can wake the dreamer up. However, if you were to die in the multi-level dream world, then that would send you to a place called limbo. Limbo is a shared subconscious space where the mind fails to tell if it's in a dream or reality. This is where Cobb ended up accidentally performing Inception, making Mal, his dead wife, who's now a projection in his mind, believe that she was still in limbo when they were sent back to reality, by leaving the top, or his totem, spinning in her safe. And that's what caused Mal to end up killing herself in reality.
Look at me! Oh no! Jesus Christ!
Now I've said this word many times throughout this explanation, which is Inception, but what exactly is that? Basically, in every subject's dream world, there's a safe at level 3 or lower, where you can plant an idea to make the person believe the idea is theirs, as I discussed with Mal believing she was still in limbo with the spinning top. However, this idea has to be in line with the life of the subject, so I can't go over and take a bag of webs and place it in your safe, making you believe that you're Spider-Man all of a sudden. Now going back to the rules of Limbo, like I discussed with the kicks, the music playing for Tom Hardy and Gordon Levitt helped them escape their dreams. The rest of the group had to use falls on each level in order to help them wake up. Let's say Joseph Gordon-Levitt never put the headphones on Tom Hardy's head in level 2, and if in level 3 Tom Hardy were to get shot in the head, that would end up counting as a death and not a synchronized kick, and that would send him directly into limbo. In the case of Cobb, however, level 4 is where many people believe that he dies when Mal stabs him, but it's really in the van where he drowns along with Watanabe, which ends up putting both of them in limbo. However, earlier on in the movie, Watanabe ends up suffering a gunshot to his chest, which ends up making him die earlier than Leonardo DiCaprio. And due to the time dilation taking place, that's what caused Watanabe's character to look much older than DiCaprio in Limbo. It was that tiny difference in time that made their ages significantly different. When it comes to death in Limbo, Cobb and Saito were able to transport themselves all the way back to reality, so no synchronized kicks were required. So just to repeat, synchronized kicks are required on different levels of the dream world except for Limbo, where you're able to be sent directly back to reality. Hopefully this was explained well enough for you to understand. Now the only question that really remains that I don't have the answer to is if the spinning top is still moving at the end of the movie. Its movements could mean that it was ready to topple, but other movements in the film prove it could be stuck infinitely spinning. However, that's for you to decide if Cobb is still in a dream or if he's in reality. I hope you enjoyed today's class session on Inception, and without any further ado, let's bring reviewer me back to the picture. Oh boy. Okay, so hopefully I didn't completely lose you during that session. So how about we go ahead and just start wrapping up our thoughts? What can I say except Nolan is one of the best when it comes to his story and writing. Inception is one of those films that can take something as simple as dreaming and turn it into something more complex while using elements that your average everyday Joe is familiar with. Apart from Nolan's ideas on the dream world, I think the film does a great job in telling a suspenseful story with many twists and turns throughout, as well as showing a great display of teamwork from the cast. Every second will have you at the edge of your seat wondering where exactly the story's gonna go next. It's one of those films that needs a second viewing after the first when you fully understand the ideas, and it honestly gets better once you have that all in mind. If you haven't given Inception a viewing yet, I would highly recommend it, as it's quite the experience to watch, and it's probably the only thing you're going to be thinking about for a while. Just make sure to not overthink everything that's happening on screen, because you're going to end up having the same headache that I did after viewing. With all its unique ideas and well-told story from one of the best directors out there right now, I'm going to go ahead and give Inception 8 out of 10 spinning tops.
Once an idea has taken hold in the brain, it's almost impossible to eradicate.
So I'd like to know, what do you guys think of Inception? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you not care to watch it? I'd love to know in the comments below. And if you made it this far in the video, I'd appreciate it if you leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel for more future movie content. I'd also like to know if you guys still think the top is spinning. I really don't know what to think about that, to be honest. But anyways, thank you guys for joining me in this review. And until the next one, you guys, I'll see you later.